This is Darby Dawn at station 222. Bring it up, Darby Dawn. How do you folks out there tonight? Keep them cards and letters coming in. Just keep writing right here, and we'll do all them good things for you here at station 222. Yeah. Darby Dawn here. Oh, yes, of course. This is the final, and tonight, the final and concluding chapter of Godzilla meets Godzonka. You know who Godzonka is? That's the new monster we have created based on the total monster concept. You know, everybody has a monster in his life, even if it's only in his mind. And a lot of you even married the monster in your life. Now, that includes all 6 or 7 sexes here at this point. And so I'm making no absolute decisions one way or the other as to morality. However, I will say this. You are at the right spot on the dial tonight for a horror story par excellence. Now, you recall yesterday as we began our tremendous episode of Godzonka. Godzonka is a classical, a truly evil monster. Now, all monsters are supposed to be evil. Very few of them achieve it. Primarily because the people who create monsters are too tied to the past. They think monsters are mummies. Well, Philip Roth took care of Mummy in the Portnoy's Complaint, didn't he? He certainly did. And Mummy's been put down by every playwright from O'Neill through Tennessee Williams. And so mummies aren't really as evil as they used to be. Do you agree? No. Vampires, bloodsuckers are not as evil as they used to be because most of us have become vampires or bloodsuckers one way or another. Depends on the union you're in, right? So, so who can be afraid of Dracula? Dracula. That's a great new tune. Well, nobody's afraid of Dracula anymore because, as I said, bloodsucking is a major national sport today. So you can't be afraid of yourself, right? All you got to do is grow them little teeth in the front, huh? Those 2 little sharp teeth. Although some people are already growing them. My God, I tell you, the other day I went into my bank and I just had a little technical problem to clear up, you know. I just went in there, I had a couple of forms and stuff, and I sat down at this guy's desk. Now, I've been seeing this guy for a long time. The same guy in the bank, you know. He's got this little vice president sign. And he smiled at me, and he's the guy that approves loans. I had nothing to do with loans. He just happens to approve loans, you know. The one, well, actually, he disapproves loans. He doesn't actually approve them. He has a big thing that says, reject, you know. And he keeps, he laughs. He's no, it's funny to see him reading these applications once in a while. I'll sneak up on him, you know, and he'll actually be laughing at you. He laughs. Hey, Fred, look at this one. And then he takes the great big stamp. God, down the chute it goes. Well, funny thing, I sat down opposite him, you know, I just needed a form filled out or something, and he smiled. And by George, he's got these 2 sharp teeth in the front. He never had them before. He kept looking at my neck. What am I going to do, you know? But so evil and monsters are they're very personal, you know. And I must say that the Japanese have a firm grasp of the monster world. That Rodan was actually found in Texas. As you know, a 51-foot wingspan flying mammal. Wow, that's Rodan right out of the book. It is. And I'd like to hear how, well, I know how Rodan sounded. You all know how Rodan sounded. Let's give us a little practice Rodan sound here. I make a good Rodan. I have had long experience in screaming, blood-curdling screams of despair, which incidentally is what all comics have long practiced. I got a letter from a guy. You know, I'll tell you, it's funny, interesting. The listeners to this show are divided into 2 groups. One group who actually realizes that I'm funny, and another group that thinks I'm very serious, and they're going to help me do the show by telling me a very interesting story that happened to their grandmother. Yes, indeed. Hello there, Fatso. How are you out there? Well, nevertheless, I'd like to give you another Rodan, please, if you may. Another guy wrote to me and says, Shepard, you're too self-indulgent. And I'd like to tell you this. You point out to me a good comic who isn't self-indulgent, and I'll point out to you an insurance man. The only way you can get ahead in this, the only way you can do what you do, there's no artist that isn't self-indulgent. By nature, that's what an artist is. He indulges in the self. And that's why, by the way, practically every totalitarian regime, the first thing they do is chase the artists out of the country. Because, you know, a guy sitting around there painting them pictures, you know, making generals look like big fat slobs with bugging eyeballs, you know, he gets chased right out quick. That's self-indulgent. Oh, you bet. The guy that writes the story, you know, that, well, you go on. We got the only country in the world you can do this, you know. I must say that, and I'm not chauvinistic, but this is the only country in the world where a guy can do what I'm doing on radio, believe me. I can guarantee you that. If you think that's not true, you name another country. And if you say England, you don't know anything about the BBC, buddy, oh boy. Right. That's right. Oh, not you. Oh, heavens no. You never heard of the BBC, Al. Well, nevertheless, I must say that before we get on with tonight's concluding episode of the thrilling saga of Godzonka, a true American monster. See, the thing that makes this monster real is that he's an American monster. Now, the Japanese monster, for example, one of my favorite ones is come on, which one? Let's see if you remember. What is the monster that eats transformers and lives on electricity? Gamera? Correct. Gamera ate, well, and he was a horrible monster because, you see, there's nothing more important to the Japanese than electricity. After all, their whole bit, you know, is hi-fi, stereo, Panasonic television sets. And if a monster comes and eats all the transformers and eats up all the electricity, forget it. Their whole business is down the drain, right? So that's why Gamera was a really scary Japanese monster. Yes, I remember one scene where he was high up on this mountain eating this AC power station. Yeah, and he was crunching it and yelling. Oh, he yelled like crazy. And the way it went, give me a little more of that. Boom! Kapow! Boom! Kaboom! That was the sound of Gamera eating a 30,000 volt 17 amp transformer. Of course, it was blowing up like crazy, sparks coming out of his ears and everything. He loved it. See, he lived on that. He mainlined AC current. He did not live on DC, interestingly enough. There were no scenes of him eating a great big case of Penlight batteries, which wouldn't have been very exciting because they don't make many sparks. But they sure play hob with your lower colon, I can tell you. But nevertheless, Gamera was, you know, one of my favorite animals. And so, now you see the name is important. Godzonka, God, you see. Evil, good, all of these things. Thunderbolts. You notice Godzilla has the name G-O-D in there. See, this is all part of them. You don't know whether you love-hate relationship is very important in monsters. But Godzonka is based on an America. Of course, we all know it's based on Larry Csonka. Larry Csonka, if you've ever tried to stop him short of a 7-yard gain, you know. So, monsters, you know, we'll conclude tonight's exciting episode of Godzonka Strikes Again. Incidentally, this is only the first movie in the series. We are going to have other movies when Godzonka returns. You know, none of these monsters are ever killed ultimately. How many times has Frankenstein's monster come back? Now, you know, Frankenstein is not the name of the monster. I hate to tell you this. You know that. That's the name of the doctor. It is Dr. Frankenstein, who was trying all of his life to create life, to bring back people and to restore life. And that's what his whole career was about. Of course, everybody's against that in that little town there where he worked. It was not Transylvania. I bet none of you know where Dr. Frankenstein did his original work. Whiting, Indiana. That's right. He later moved to that dark European country where guys hopped around and played flutes, Igor. But what was the name of his monster? Aha. And was it a monster? You recall living in the cave in Utah, and the young astrophysical scientist, also a colonel in the Air Force, Steve, remember him? Drives that 57 Ford like you see in all the Class X movies, or Class B, really. Yeah, it's an L.A. cheapie, actually. And they all have 57 Fords in them, usually convertibles. Because, you know, it's much cheaper to shoot in the convertible, you know, the top. You don't have to get the camera in. Oh, you know, they get all involved. And he's with his girlfriend. We've selected a typical name that they all have, either Beverly or Barbara. You take your choice. And she is a young astrophysical biochemist. And just by an odd coincidence, the scientist who has been predicting disaster as a result of the evil atomic bomb testing over the state of Utah is played by Keenan Wynn, Dr. Oscherschlager. And he's having a terrible time getting in touch with Steve and Barbara, telling them to look out, that Godzonka is loose, and that he suspects that he is up to no good, as all good monsters are up to, right? Now, while we're on the subject of getting some of the mail out of the way, a kid here writes, Shepard, I hear you're a stamp collector. Ha 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 ha! Kid, are you kidding? I'm a stamp collector. Get out. Kid, I went through the stamp collecting phase at the age of 4. Collected 17 bags of Yugoslavian stamps, which I bought for 10 cents a bag at Woolworths. Did you know they used to sell stamps at Woolworths, collectors? Yeah, sure, they had a stamp department. They used to have a goldfish department at Woolworths, too, and a canary department. And you go and watch the canaries. You know, it was a real terrible scene. I once saw a shoplifter get caught going out of a Woolworths with a canary sticking out of his ear. And it's not easy to shoplift a canary, I'll tell you. Little varmints, they keep yelling and hollering. You know how they are. They don't. No, nobody cooperates. But kid wrote and says, "Here you're a stamp collector." No, kid, I'm not. I have three esoteric hobbies. Only 2 of which I'll tell you about. One esoteric hobby is, would you believe it or not, I collect fountain pens. I do. I collect fountain pens. I really do. I can't tell you why I like fountain pens. I love them. I do. I collect. Yeah. Well, you know. Do you know that Mort Saul is a watch freak? Every time Saul goes out on a road trip or any place, he buys some kind of a cockamamie watch, and he wears them all the time. Sometimes he had 30, 40 watches going all the way up his left arm. You know, he's walking with a limp these days. They're so heavy. And he's got cuckoo clock watches, and he's got watches that give you a shock every time you tell a lie. He's got watches that have special little concrete. Oh, you know, it's just wow. He's got a mugger watch, by the way. It's great. Oh yeah. When you're approached by a mugger, it shoots poison gas into his nostrils. Shh, just like that. See, what you have to do, you say to the mugger, say, "Excuse me, mugger, do you mind if I check the time so that when the police ask me what time this happened, that I can tell them?" Well, now, your average mugger, he's seen plenty of television shows. He knows this is important. So your usual mugger, he wants to get on the record. So the mugger says, "Yeah, go ahead, but make it quick." At that point, you grab your watch, you say, "Oh, it's 10 minutes past 4 a.m. And just as you say that, it is voice operated. Shh, right in the nostril. He's a deader. Then, of course, you frisk him, grab his wallet, and leave. So, you know, everybody has to live. You know, I saw a cop today, just sad cop. You know, he's been on the force 30 years here in New York. And he was looking kind of sad. He was out here at the corner of 48th Street, 6th Avenue, and I'm walking along, and I stopped, and I bought a paper. I bought my favorite porny rag. You know what pornography is getting to be, pictures of people with clothes on, see? So I bought this paper there, and I'm standing in the corner, and I just had to talk to him. I was waiting for the light, and I says, "Gee, you look kind of down today, officer." He says, "Sure and begone I am." And I said, "What's the matter?" He says, "Well," he says, "I guess habits don't go away so easy." And I said, "What's the matter?" "Officer O'Leary." I could tell by his name tag that his name was Officer O'Leary. It was spelled L-E-E-R-Y. He's very leery of everything. So I said, "Officer O'Leary, what is the trouble?" He says, "Well," he says, "you know, all the young men on the force, they say every time they get a bad guy, they say freeze. And I keep saying halt." He says, "It's about the old days, you know. I studied under Jimmy Cagney and Pat O'Brien in the movies, and they always said halt. Halt, stop thief. And I chased the guy all the way up to 57th Street hollering halt. And I forgot I should say freeze today." So, you know, in television today, they holler freeze, right? Nobody hollers, "Halt, stop!" You know, it's freeze. And it was sad. He's the last of the old guard. So, nevertheless, I collect fountain pens, kid. And if any of you have got an old fountain pen out there that you don't like, one that's been squirting ink all over your $70 suits, and or even if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. You just send it off here. I'll take care of it. I'll take care of the fountain pen here. I'll get it working. I'll give it a good home, and that's all right. That's just the only way, you know. Fountain pens are totally useless, so don't think they're worth an immense amount of money. I have a friend once who had an Esterbrook. No, we'll get into that one. I'd just like to know how many fountain pens have kept many a cleaning establishment in business. Oh, I'll tell you, you're great. I remember one time, you know, I got this fountain pen when I was graduating, and my Aunt Gwen gave it to me. It was a fountain. It was a mottled kind. It had like a sort of fake marble. And I really thought it was great. It was a Waterman pen, and you know, the Waterman. It was really great, and that was a very elegant pen supposedly at the time. So I was given this this fountain pen the day of my graduation from 8th grade, and I was really proud of it. See, so immediately I filled it up with ink, and I had this graduation suit. You know how kids get a graduation suit, and I stuck the fountain pen right where my old man always wore his fountain pen, which was in the breast pocket inside of the coat suit. See, it was fantastic. By the end of that afternoon, I didn't know it. I had a two-tone suit. Ledger blue and iridescent pink, which was the original color of the suit. Well, you know how kids, they think pink suits are great. But I'll never forget that. And it never came out, you know. They had this thing that says washable ink on the other side. That really doesn't mean you can wash it out. It means you can wash hell out of it and nothing happens. That's what that means. So nothing came out. So I collect fountain pens. Maybe it's a form of retribution. So if you have an old fountain pen, just send it off here to the station, WOR, and send it and address it to Fountain Pen Freak. And they'll know who it is. Fountain Pen Freak Shepherd, and I'll get it. I also collect old radios. Unfortunately, most of my listeners to listen to me on old radios, so it's self-destructive. If I collect all the old radios my listeners have got, I got no rating, and then I have to go on PBS again and do one of those, shows where you interview authors. However, let's get back to reality. All set in there? Those are my hobbies. I collect old radios, and if you have an old radio in the attic and you'd like to get rid of it, just send me a note, and I will make a decision as to whether I want it. Don't think I want them all, Daddy. Oh, wow. But the fountain pens, you know. Okay, now let's get back to tonight's adventure. Now, this is a truly horrible monster, and if you have a kid that is squeamish, and actually, this is the kind of monster that will scare grown-ups more than it scares kids because of the ramifications of this monster. Remember, monsters are only fearsome if they deal with something that is crucial to your life, to your way of existence. So, for example, Dracula was evil not because he sucked blood, but because, you know what he did? He gave the people who he infected with that evil Dracula bacillus, he gave them eternal life, which was totally irreligious. Now today, you'd kind of like to see Dracula today, you know, with the decline of religion. Dracula knocks on your door with the bloody teeth and all that bit. You come on in, friend, you know, that'll show those guys at the AMA, you know. Well, it's kind of like a chain letter, you know. You had to go around and nip somebody else to keep in the club. So, nevertheless, Dracula was irreligious. That's really basically, and that's why Frankenstein's monster was evil. I mean, he was bringing back the dead, see, and bringing them back to life. That's a terrible religious. Only when Gabriel blows that big trumpet in the sky, and all the dead supposedly come back to some kind of corporeal existence, whatever the fundamentalists believe. But here, this guy was doing it in his own laboratory and cackling while he did it. I'll bring them back, you know. And he had a kite. You remember the kite up in the air? He was taking the lightning bolts, and they were bringing the electricity and putting the things on his ear, and it was fantastic, right? Well, all right. We have a truly horrible monster for you tonight. Will you hear what he does? All right, now, here we go. All set now? Get ready with our theme. Our theme. Now, wait a minute. It's number 2. This is our theme. Our theme as we bring you part 2, the concluding portion of Godzonka. You will recall that our yesterday's episode opened with a voice from a high, intoning over a scene of an exploding atomic bomb. The voice said, Man is dealing with forces of the unknown. He is playing with natural forces which could destroy all human life as we know on the face of the earth. Mankind must beware. And as the bomb exploded, we saw coming out of a cave in the dark of night the glowing eyes of an enormous creature that had been disturbed from its age-old sleep of over 72 million years. A creature which had existed long before the age of reptiles, as it came slowly to life and moved out of the cave into the Utah desert. We heard the first sounds of Godzonka after his 72 million years sleep. Yes, evil once again was a stalk in the land, and another great monster had been awakened by man's silly, foolish, monkeying around with atomic sources of power of the total universe. And back in the Pentagon, Professor Kurt von Oschenschlager, played by Keenan Wynn, warned his fellow scientists about what was about to occur. In fact, reports had already come back from Utah of a strange monster seen by travelers late at night, a monster that no one could quite countenance or believe existed. But Dr. von Oschenschlager said, and we quote, I was telling them from the very beginning that they cannot fool with these sources of eternal power, which could very well prove to be the final death knell of mankind as we know it, of course, in our century. And you mean to tell me that young Dr. Steve and young Dr. Barbara have gone all the way out to Utah? And I have warned them that this monster could very well be so evil that none of us can deal with it. We must get the Air Force. We must get the Army. We must get the sheriff of Utah County. We must get everybody involved. And at that point, he hung up. He was talking on the telephone to the sheriff of Utah. Very important type. He has his big hat on that, and he has all these squad cars. They're 1957 Fords, all over, and says police on the side. And who is it? It's played by Forrest Tucker. And Forrest Tucker hung up the phone and said, well, I had another one of them kooks on the phone. Clyde, call in here. He says there's some monster going around the desert out there. I'll tell you what that monster is. That's Clyde's wife, right, Clyde? We know about that. Well, they ain't going to get me going running out there in the dark with all my shotguns going, all that kind of stuff. They ain't going to fool me. Well, at that point, the camera suddenly shifted and a new scene had opened up, and we saw Steve, young Dr. Steve, who was also a colonel in the Air Force Reserve. Young Dr. Steve, who is a biochemist, a famous astrologist. He is driving along in his 57 Ford convertible. Mysteriously, he's suddenly gotten all the way from the Pentagon to the Utah desert. And unsuspectingly, he is driving along this dark highway with Barbara, his colleague in the laboratory. She is a young biochemist of exceedingly interesting charms. And they are driving along in the dark. And Steve is saying, poor old Dr. Oschenschlager. He's a poor old guy. He's probably finally gone bonkers. He believes there's a monster loose here in the Utah desert. How ridiculous. Well, I've driven all the way out here to prove to him that this is not so. And it's probably just some guy fooling around with his bulldozer. But we'll take care of that. Right, Barbara? She says, well, I don't know. I don't know. You know, Dr. Oschenschlager was right that other time when he predicted those monster worms would come out and would eat all the popcorn in the shows that time. You remember that? He was right, and I'm not taking him so lightly as you are. Well, Barbara, I'll show you that there's nothing out here in this simple wilderness to fear. Why, this is the West, where never a discouraging word is heard. And at that point, just as they turn, it's dark, of course, they go around a corner of a mountain, and they see suddenly coming directly towards them this Looks like a pair of headlights high up in the sky. Actually, these are the glowing eyes of Godzonka, but they're not aware of that yet. He comes around and says, hey, look at Barbara. There seems to be an airplane or something in trouble. Look at those headlights approaching us. And then suddenly they hear echoing out of the canyons the dreaded cry that had not been heard for 72 million years. It was the voice of Godzonka, who was out stalking for the food that would keep him in existence and ravaging the world that he knew. At that point, Steve, seeing this and hearing this great cry, still not understanding what he is seeing, says to Barbara, it's not one of them kooks and one of them semi-tractor trailers. These guys think they own the road. Look at this idiot. And listen to that horn he's got. Thinks he can buffalo me, eh? Well, I'm on my side of the road, and I pay my taxes, and I got a driver's license. At that point, he drove straight at the monster, when suddenly he sees in his headlight Godzonka himself, who is now risen up on his back, enormous claw-covered legs with the scales. Ooh, he's got scales, he's got feathers, he's also got fur. It's an unbelievable monster. It looks like, actually what it looks like is a gigantic primordial bat, an enormous bat, over 75 feet tall, 6 stories high, with glowing red, greenish eyes that glow with an inner radiance. His teeth are flashing in the darkness. His great wings are blotting out the moon and the sky as he flaps his leathery wings. Curiously enough, he looks like a cross between a bat and a simple garden grub. Oh, it's an awful thing. Terrible. And then he lets go his primordial mating cry as he sees what he considers another enemy coming right at him. Steve and Barbara in their 57 Ford Galaxy. He screams. At that point, Steve gets on his two-way radio. Hello, this is Steve. Sheriff? Steve here. Sheriff. We've just sighted Godzonka. He's approaching on Highway 12. He is now just making a turn. You know where that big S-bend goes past the McDonald's? He is now coming towards me at this point. I'll have to sign off now, but he is now on the attack. Godzonka is alive! Oh, my God! At that point, you see the sheriff now. It switches back to the sheriff, and his radio's going, this is Steve. He's Godzonka! He says, it's gone. Great Scott. This must be some kind of a trick. I don't believe that. He's all right, you guys, get out there and go down that Route 12 down there, get down towards that McDonald. Because Steve is out there, and Steve says that there's some kind of a monster. He's probably been drinking, but we can't take no chances, boys. At that point, the 2 squad cars go roaring out. Wow, wow! Off they go into the night with their red lights flashing on the top of the car there. And whoo, 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 whoo! They're going off into the night. The great wheels of justice are beginning to move, and America is beginning to stir from its lethargy as they realize a monster is at long last. And you see lightning, little lines of communication going along the telephone poles. Godzonka, Godzonka. We see a quick shot of what looks like Lyle Van on the television. He says, today it was reported that a monster named Godzonka was loose on the Utah desert. All people are warned. And then that's quickly shot. There's a quick shot inside the Pentagon, and you see a great crowd of Army officers saying, they're pointing at a map. And they're saying, we must alert the fighter squadrons. And then you see fighters in the air, all moving towards Godzonka. And now there's a shot now where we begin to approach Godzonka himself. It is dark, and Godzonka is rising up on his hind legs. He screams again. And now we see Steve and Barbara hiding behind one of the hills. He says, we stand alone. You and I stand between the destruction of all mankind. God, what we have loosed with our atomic energy tests. Professor Rauschenschlager was right. What are we going to do? If I can only get Professor Rauschenschlager on our two-way radio, he's the only man that can give us the formula to stop Godzonka. But my two-way radio has been put out of action by mysterious magnetic waves, which obviously Godzonka is generating from deep inside of his primordial bloodstream. We must solve this problem, or mankind is doomed. Dum, dum, dum. Wow, at this time, we're just going to have to take a couple of seconds to let you rest. Phew. Oh, now you run out and go to the John, you come back with another box of popcorn, now you're ready to see the rest of the movie, right? You're going to find out what Godzonka is after. And that's what Professor Oschenschlager knows. Professor Oschenschlager is frantically trying to contact the sheriff of Utah County because he knows how to finally get him. He says, quick, put me through. What do you mean? All the lines are busy. I must get through. I have the formula. I know how to stop Godzonka. He will kill everything in his path. He has an insatiable thirst. And at that point, we see Godzonka now moving along this great 4-lane highway. He is covering it with enormous wings. He's crunching down Greyhound buses. People are screaming and running into the desert. He is smashing down semi-tractor trailers. He's even smashing down new Pintos, everything. He's walking along the highway, and he's screaming as he goes. And suddenly he stands high up on his hind legs. He has spotted what his goal, his destination is. And for that brief moment, that brief instant, hey, come on, now watch my cues, you guys. You get so involved in the story, you're sitting there. Come on, give me number one. One, that's right. He has spotted that instant, that moment. When you're doing a dramatic show, you gotta watch your cues, you fools. Let's go. He has spotted his destiny. And a brief, mysterious hush falls over the desert as Godzonka moves inexorably forward. People run screaming into the night. And you see the police cars roaring up with shotguns at the ready. We see great jet planes coming from the far eastern horizon, all the way from the Pentagon. We see atomic bombs being readied because this could be the end of all mankind. Godzonka has become activated and is on the loose, and he spots what he is after. And with a sudden rush, he envelops an Esso station. An Esso station, and a great pipe comes out of the front of his beak, down right into the tanks. He's sucking up the high-octane Esso extra special gas. Godzonka sucks up all the gas out of the Esso station. And at that point, we see Professor von Oschenschlager say, this monster, he lives on petroleum. He does nothing but drink gasoline. And if he drinks all the gasoline in America, our economy will crumble into nothing. All the campers will be useless. No one will be able to take their vacation this year. We must stop that evil creature. He will destroy all of America. He drinks gasoline. There is only one solution. And even as we watch, Godzonka is growing bigger and bigger because he has that great big mouthful, that gigantic belly full of fresh, wonderful Exxon high test. He is galloped down 40,000 gallons. And now he's moving on to the Shell station. Yes, there goes the beak down. And now he moves along US 66. He is stopped by the Getty station. Down goes the beak. And the radio is saying at this point, ladies and gentlemen, we have terrible news to report. In just 12 minutes, Godzonka has drunk all the gasoline in the state of Utah. He is now moving towards California, where he will have a veritable orgy of gasoline drinking. By nightfall, unless we stop Godzonka, our entire country will go down. Our economy can no longer survive with Godzonka drinking all the gasoline. According to Professor Oschenschlager of the Pentagon and the U.S. Department of Monster Control, this monster is capable of drinking all the gasoline in the world in less than 3 days. Godzonka must be stopped. Oh, wow, boys and girls, that ends tonight's episode of Godzonka. Holy smokes. Just imagine how your mommy and your daddy would feel if Godzonka drank all the gasoline in New Jersey. Just think how you would feel if you had to put nothing but old oleomargarine in your Honda and it wouldn't go. Yes, this evil monster must be stopped. Listen next week for the concluding chapter of Godzonka Stripes Again. How did they find out how to stop him? What secret did Professor Oschenschlager know? Oh, tune in next week and find out, boys and girls. Boy, that was exciting, wasn't it, gang? Don't forget to send in your box top.